Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to have a few interesting topics today. The first one is going to see how we can update a project created with the init tool. I'm going to take like a 2 years old project, so it still has some of the most recent extension, like the bundle one, even though that extension has changed quite a lot over the last 2 years, but it will also show how to future-proof a project for future updates. We're also going to look into the new runtime font support. So no need to pre-process your fonts anymore if you don't want to. You can actually use TrueType and OpenType font to generate font on the fly. Not only regular font, but also sign distance field one. So SDF1, multi-SDF1. And we'll see what we can do with that as well. And finally, we're going to look into how to do some things like rate limitation for object creation, for like limiting how many sounds we're going to create when we have like an explosion of coins or something like this. And lastly, we're going to look at a new idiom that allows us to handle complex object hierarchy in a centralized way. So let's start by updating an old project. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to build Aux. We're going to build it for all three configurations as usual. So the debug one, which is done, the profile one only takes a few seconds, so I thought I would do it during the stream, and the release one here. And all good. We have all three versions of Aux. We don't need this anymore. So the project I'm talking about, it was a project I made with Scrimper here. We made it for the Ludum Dare 51. That was a bit over 2 years ago. As you can see, the last commit was from February 2023. I'm sorry, it's a bit small in Tortoise HG. I don't know how to zoom this one, but we're not going to look too much at it. Just so that we can see that there were no edits. It's really like the code as it was 2 years ago. And we're going to update this project. Sorry. We will have to make a few changes after updating, and that's the whole point of this exercise. So the first thing we need to do is just call init, and the project is in workspace LD51. By doing this, I could pick like new set of extension, but for this project, I only need scroll and bundle, which are the two default extensions. So I'm just going to start like this, and the project has been updated. Now we're going to have to update a few things manually, but let's first see what this means. If we refresh, we can see that some files have been updated, some files have been added, and some files have been removed. It removed the data music folder, unfortunately, because I didn't add the music extension, the mod extension. I'm just going to revert this because I want to keep my music, right? So done. However, in the new files, I'm not going to use everything. Like, for example, I'm not using Visual Studio Code, so those guys I will just get rid of. And here you can see the new config file for LD51 because it's the name of the project I asked in it, except that in the past, I manually renamed that project as Cypermenace, which is the name of the game. So we're going to have to redo this modification inside the pre-make script, and that also means that I don't need the LD51 config file. And lastly, we're going to remove all the sample data, like the sound, the appear sound, the logo, and the extra fonts, because I'm not using them in this project either. What we're going to keep, though, is all the new extension. Before, like 2 years ago, the extension were the root of the include folder. Now they are all self-contained in an extension subfolder, which means that when you're going to add and remove extension, it's only going to modify that extension folder. But because back then it wasn't the case, I need to add those guys here. So there we go, they are added. And that also means that I will have to remove the old ones. So here we can actually go to the project folder. And we can see that in the include here, we have the extension that contains a new extension, as you can see here. But we also have the old ones, and I'm just going to remove the old ones. So I was using scroll and bundle, but you might have been using different ones. Just need to get rid of it, and that's the gist of it for the file modification. And lastly, we're going to modify the pre-make script here. One of the modifications that we know we're going to need is that right now, if we look at it, LD51, that's the name of the solution, but that's also the name of the project itself. So all the occurrence of LD51 except for the solution. So not the solution. I'm going to rename, as I did in the past, as Cypermanes, and I'm going to save that script. And those are the only things I need to correct, but it's only because in the past, for that project, I did the same manipulation, so I need to redo it this time. Lastly, we're going to make a diff on that project file just to see what kind of changes happened in the last 2 years. As you can see, there's a new configuration bundle that was added. There's a new configuration to support the web. We're also going to cover the web target platform with this project as well. We're going to have our project running on the web at the end of these little updates. Here we can see it's still modification for the web. And here it's also like adding a bunch of things for the web version. There's only a couple of changes I want to keep from my old one, is that I had a resource file that I added manually. I want to keep this, so I'm re-importing the resource file, and that's the only change I want to keep from it. So I'm saving this, and I'm done with this prereq script. However, we will have to regenerate our prereq, so I'm actually going to get rid of Windows entirely. I'm going to generate the Visual Studio 2022. So if we look at here, we have the Visual Studio 2022. And I will also be a bit preemptive, and I will go into build, and I will generate the GMake version, which is the one we're going to use for the web export. So no matter what OS you're using, Windows, Mac, Linux, it's going to use a GMake configuration for doing the web export. So I generated this one, and which we can see here. If we go back to the Windows, we can see I have the GMake and the VS 2022. So let's now make it work, because we updated the project, but it's probably not going to even compile. So here you can see those were the old extension. I can say forget, and I'm going to remove them. So let's open the solution. We're going to go to Visual Studio 2022, and we're going to open that solution. There we go. If I were to try to compile, you can see it starts with complaining not finding scroll lotage. And this is because we migrated scroll into its own folder, so the include is just inside scroll lotage. So this is an easy fix, right? Let's see what else. Oops, not sure what I did there. Let's see what else we have. We have a bunch of complaints, and there aren't many different ones. We'll see it's mostly about the collide and separate callback on the scroll object. The main viewport and main camera, they used to be created by scroll for you. Now it's like any viewport or camera, you are in charge of creating them if you want. You can name them the way you want. You don't have to be main viewport anymore. In this case, I will keep the name viewport, but I will have to create it manually. And the last one is a function that were on the scroll object, but we're going to see that one at a time. So the first one is the onCollide. It's complained because the signature has changed. So if we actually navigate to our include here extension, we go to scroll, look at the scroll object, and if we look for the onCollide one, oops, this one, we can see that the parameter list is actually the same. It's the same one. The only change here is that now it doesn't take a return. It used to be a bool. So we're just going to change that as void. There we go. And we're going to modify also the implementation. So this guy is now void, and it's not returning anything. And same for the separate, void, and not returning anything. There we go. Now let's build. This is already much smaller. So if we look at the get model name, so back at the scroll object, we can see we have two methods here. One is called getName, and another one is called getInstantName. The getName is the name of the config section that's bound to the scroll object, whereas the getInstanceName is the name of that particular instance. Back like 2 years ago, they were called actually getModelName and getName. So the getModelName has been renamed into getName nowadays, and the old getName has been renamed as getInstanceName. So we need to first modify any getName we had in our code. So if I'm looking for this one, and we can see that they are all in scroll, that means that I never use a getName in my code base, so I don't have to modify it. So the last one is getModelName. So we're going to say get model name, and we're going to rename it as getName. So I'm going to do replace all. Done. And now if we try to build, we can see that we don't have these errors anymore. It's only the main viewport as mentioned earlier. So remember, get model name became get name, and the old get name became get instance name. Those are the two modifications you might have to do if you were using those functions. If you were not using this function, you have nothing to do there. Let's go to the main viewport here. It's in our init function. We were retrieving the main viewport to actually disable it because we had like some kind of fade from black. And the get main viewport and get main camera function don't exist anymore. If we want to retrieve a viewport named main viewport, we have to do aux viewport get and pass it main viewport. But remember, scroll does not create the main viewport for us anymore. We have to do it, create it manually. Here, that's what we're going to do in init. So instead of getting it, I am just going to create it here. Create from config. And now if I build, everything's fine. However, it's not quite done yet because we have to handle the new way of handling extension. Remember back then all the extensions were manually set at the root level. So like in your game source file, we had the bundle here, but any other extension would have been there. We have to remove this. So because now everything has been abstracted inside an extension file so that it's easy to update, to add extension or remove extension without having to modify your main source file. However, we have to do it once if your project predates that system. If your project is recent enough, you won't have to do this. So all we have to do here is include, and it's called aux extension. And now if we look for the bundle in the init, there was like an early exit. If it was processing, it's not really needed unless you really want it. So I'm just getting rid of it. What we want to do at the init, though, at the very beginning, is called init extension. It will init all the extension you selected for your project. Similarly, we go to the exits. Here, we're going to remove the bundle exit, and we're going to call exit extension. And the last one that comes, the last turn we have to do is for the bootstrap. Here, we're going to call, you probably guessed it, bootstrap extension. If we look inside the bootstrap, we'll see that the storage were added, so the bundle extension is here, but the storage were added as well, and you can see we have yet another LD51 because that was the name of the project I requested. But we all know that we need to call it Cypermenace because that's the rename I made in the past. We don't need to keep the storage here. It's done in the bootstrap extension. And that's it. We have entirely updated our project. So if I didn't make any mistake and I start it, the game is running and everything is working fine. The sound, the music, the logic, everything is there. So, well, that's it. That covers how to migrate an old project from 2 years back with a new version of Scroll, and also future-proof it in the sense that the modification we did for the init, exit, bootstrap extension, you won't have to modify that in the future. You can add new extension, you can remove extension. Everything will be contained in the extension file we've seen here, this one, and only that file is going to be modified. And as you can see at the top, it tells you this file is generated automatically by init. Do not modify it because it's going to be overwritten next time you init your project. The good thing is that you don't have to modify your project anymore once this is done. And if your project was recent enough to already have this, well, you don't even have to do anything here. Is there any questions now for the upgrade to a recent aux and within it? I will take that as no. So let's move on to the next step. We're going to export the game for the web, for the HTML5 target. So the HTML5 target by default rely on the bundle extension. So if you want to make a web game, you have to use the bundle extension, and it will be set up by using the project name as a single bundle. If you have multiple bundles, you will have to modify the script, the pre-made script, but in this case here, we're just going to keep that set up because it should work in most cases, if not all. So the things we want to make sure is that all our resources are going to be found from the bundle, right? Like this one here. So we want to make sure that the Cypermenace OBR is going to be used not only for the config group here, but also if we look at our config here, CyperMNS. We want to make sure that it's also going to be used for texture, sound, font if we add font, and any other group you have. So we're just going to edit bundle CyperMNS. And by default, Orcs does it. It's just that in the past I said, oh, I want needed, so I removed it, but it was before HTML5, right? So now we are HTML5 ready. The last thing we need to do is build either the release of the bundle version. The only difference is on Windows. On Mac and Linux, they are exactly the same. On Windows, the bundle one will keep the system terminal so that you can actually see the log. Whereas if you build the release one, there is no terminal and you cannot see the log unless you look at the log file. So we are just going to build the bundle version of our game. And that's it. Now we need to compile it for HTML5. The way to do it is by using Emscripten. So if you go to the Emscripten webpage, they have tutorial on how to install it. Basically, you have to clone a Git repository and run a few EM SDK command. I think it's install, update, activate, something like this. All the documentation is on Emscripten, so I won't cover this. I will assume that you already have an Emscripten install working, because it's really vanilla. There's nothing special about it. What we need to do, though, is build Orcs itself for that target. So if I go here, we're inside Orcs. We're going to go inside code, build. I'm on Windows, Windows GMake. And here we're going to invoke the mmake for Emscripten make. The command is make-d. And the config we want is the release web instead of release 32 or 64 that we're used to. And I'm actually going to clean it to make sure that we are building entirely this afternoon, sorry. And there, we are building Orcs in release only for the web. We could build the profile and the debug, but I would suggest to do that only if you need to debug or profile your game for the web target. Most of the time, it will just work out of the box. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm only doing the release. And hopefully, I won't need to build a debug one. So we're waiting for it to finish. It should be done shortly. There we go. So now Orcs has been built for HTML5 as well. And we're going to our project here. And same thing, we're going into the Windows GMake here. And it's exactly the same command line. So mmake-j and config equal release web. And you can see that when we start this, it will actually invoke the executable we built for creating the bundle. And you can see here, those are all the resources we are using for this project here. They've been discovered, they've been bundled, and in the end, we have a 5.66 megabyte bundle. And now it's done. The web version has been compiled. So how do we test this? If we go back and go to the bin folder, where usually we have our executable, there's a subdirectory called web. Inside this subdirectory, you will see the game we just created, and this is the JavaScript bridge for the game, and the actual code here is in WebAssembly. That's both the engine and the game here, and we have a bunch of other JavaScript for the audio worker and the thread workers. And this is the data. Basically, it's our bundle that's been transformed into some data that is processable by Emscripten. The only thing we need to change is the index.html, because init creates this file here. And if we look at index, there's still the LD51, right? Because again, I modified the name of my project. If you didn't modify the name of your project, you don't have to worry about this, but I did. So here I'm going to rename it. This is CyperMNS. And we're going to see that there is also the JavaScript. Here it's CyperMNS JavaScript. And you can actually see it here, right? It's CyperMNS JavaScript. It's what we want to invoke. Emscripten comes with a way to generate a web server on the fly that will serve your game. The command, I think, is mrun, but it's also extremely slow. Loading the page takes a few seconds. It's really annoying to iterate. So what I prefer doing is using an open source web server called Caddy, just because, Caddy is a single executable that with all the dependencies inside it, no matter which OS you choose. So if we are going to look at C runtime Caddy here, we can see there's only caddy.exe. It's about 40 megabytes. and everything is self-contained. It's a very simple web server to use, and Ox will actually, the init will actually generate a CADI file for you with all the setup for it. You see it's very short as well. You can obviously use any web server you want. And just for convenience, I have the CADI file generated for you. So all you have to do is, if you have CADI, you type CADI run, and now the game is actually working. So if I were to start Firefox and go to localhost, you can see that our game is here. The music and everything, and it's playable, and it's in the web. You have your web version of your game, just like this, nothing else to do. Any questions on this? Well, I'll take it as a no. That was it for updating a 2-year-old project and supporting HTML5 version of it as well. There are a couple of quirks known for, like, actually, let me restart the game. So, for example, if we have the game here, we can see that it supports like resizing correctly, like no matter what the resolution of my window works, even full screen is working totally fine. But it's on desktop. For some reason, on mobile, it's not working correctly and we have some resolution issue. I haven't had the time to look into it because it's mobile only. Even like with a simulator, an emulator for the mobile on the desktop, it's still working fine. It's just on mobile, it's not working, at least with Chrome. If someone wants to look into it, I'd be happy to receive an EPR. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I'm sure it's something very easy to fix, but know that it is the current known caveats for the web target, is that on mobile, for some reason, the resolution is not handling perfectly like it is on desktop. And there might be other caveats that we haven't met, right? Like the web support is only has been added on Arcs. Has been added to Arcs last December, so over Christmas, so it's still very recent. Not a lot of people have been using it. Some games have been published with it yet, but it's still very early, so yeah, you might run into some issues. Please just report them and I will be happy to fix them over time. And that's it for updating this project. So now we're going to talk about the new runtime fonts and more advanced feature as well. So in order to do this, we are going to go create a new project, right? So going back to Arcs here, I'm going to get rid of things I don't need anymore. I don't need this guy here. I don't need this. Oh, and here you can see all the changes that were made since 2 years ago. So I will probably push it. And this way we'll update our game to also run on the web. But I'm not going to do this now. I'm going to get rid of this. So let's create a new project. Again, we could pick like a bunch of extensions. For this in particular, we don't need anything out of the ordinary. So I'm just going to init it in live and live 16. There we go. Project has been created. So let's go to it. So live 16. There we go. If we go to build Windows, yes, we have the solution here, which is live 16 solution. There we go. Let's build a debug version. And this is a sample init project. Let's make it more nice for the streaming setup. So same as usual, I'm going to remove the borderless full screen. I'm going to say screen width. We inherit from the camera frustum width. And screen height, we inherit from the frustum height. And we're also going to say that we console font scale. We're going to make it larger so that we can actually read what I type in the console. There we go, much better. Well, actually, you know what? Let's run it. We can see that at the bottom, there's already like an example of the live text. This is done with the TrueType font, and the font is generated on the fly. And here in this particular case, it's SDF font, so a sign distance field, which allows us to do something like you can probably barely see it, but there is a glow around it, like a red glow. But we're going to play a bit more with this. So let's go. Let's keep just one of the text. I think it's called subtitle. There we go. Let's get rid of the rest. We're just going to keep the font. Okay, and here there was a scale of 1.5. And you know what? Let's put it in release so that it's a bit faster. Oh, actually, so that you experience it. In debug, here it appears quite fast. There we go. I will keep it here. So every time I change it here, you will see that the font is going to be like recomputed. So for example, if I change the color of the glow, let's put something more like purple, you can see the font has been recreated as soon as I save the file, because right now we're in debug, the watch list is here, and we do the hot reloading. However, you can see that it blinks for a little while. It's because creating a font which is SDF, so let's say the font wasn't SDF, it's like instant. You can see, even in debug, it's very, very quick. However, the issue with this is that when not using SDF, first, we don't have like all those nice parameters that we're going to see later, like these guys here. And secondly, it's just a plain bitmap font like we could create up until now with the Ox font gen. And the issue is that if we like scale it largely compared to its initial font, the glyph size, you can see it's very blurry around the edges. It is not pretty. It's just a bitmap font that's been scaled in, right? Whereas if I were to create it as an SDF one, and let me actually get rid of these guys, you can see it's already much less fuzzy. And we can actually make it even more precise by looking at the creation template here. If we look for typeface font, which is a new kind of font we have here, we can see we have a bunch of parameters, because typeface font, when the SDF is active, is going to use a shader to get the SDF, the sign distance field information, and translate it into a visual. And this is a shader that comes with Ox, but you can create your own shader as well, right? Sign distance field is only like distance information baked into a texture, and you can do whatever you want with it. The default shader allows you to have like an outline, a glow, and soft edges, and that's a soft edge I'm interested in right now. So let's keep this on top. If I were to change the soft edge mean, and you want to be around the 0.5 value, that's the limit between inside and outside of the glyph. And so here, if we say we actually put 0.5 on both of them, like something like this, you can see that here it becomes very, very crisp. Like there is no anti-aliasing anymore, but it's also very crisp at a 10 times scale, right? Remember that we are scaling 10 times. And when it was like, just to remind you, when it's not SDF, that's what we get for scaling 10 times. So SDF here is already a huge improvement. And you can probably give like a bit of fizziness on the soft edge, just so that, yeah, that sounds like a good compromise, but you can play with the values. Yeah, like that looks pretty crisp, even though we scaled it to 10 times. And it would work the same if we scale to 20, 50 times. That's one of the beauty of the sign distance field. Here you can see, however, that we generated only for like a small list of characters, like uppercase letters and a few other characters. By default, if I don't provide this, it's going to use a literal called ASCII. And if I use the ASCII ones, it will generate for all the ASCII characters. And you can see every time I save, it takes like 1 second to like compute the new font as SDF. And even if I were to do like with even more characters, like the ANSI character set, if I save it, you see that it's getting quite a long time to actually create the font. Like, oh, it's getting very long. And this is in the default 32 pixel height of the font. Let's say that we want character size be like double, like 64. Here it's going to take quite a while. That's the drawback of doing runtime SDF font. We can generate, I modified recently the Ox font gen so that we can generate SDF font with Ox, the Ox font gen utility offline, and then use them inside the engine. But be reassured, if you are not in debug but like in release, there will still be some time to create the font, but it's not going to be as bad. See, it was like probably less than a second for generating that font with all the ANSI characters in it in the 64 size. So what I'm going to do now for like playing a bit more, I'm going to remove the scale entirely. And I'm going to keep this guy here. Okay. So as you've seen, we have a character size. If we only give like a float, that means the height of the character. So here it's 64 pixels per character, per glyph. And that's the same thing as seeing 0 on X and 64 on Y. Oh, we have to go back to debug, I'm sorry, because otherwise we don't have the hot reload by default. And I'm just going to go back to the small character set so that it's quite instant. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I'm going to remove this guy here. Yeah, that broke it. So yeah, let's keep these values. It's fine. So here we say we have a 0. This font here is not a monospace font. You can see that the I is smaller than the D, for example, but we can turn any font into a monospace font. If we put a negative value for the X, it's going to get the larger glyph of the font and is going to use that width for every character. That means that if I save it like this, now we have a monospace font, and the size of the character is going to be the largest of the character we asked on the list. And you can see the I now takes the same space as the rest. And we can actually infer the width we want. Let's say we want a very skinny font with only 20 pixel wide to 64 pixel tall. If we put it like this, we see we have like very like skinny characters here. And that works even like with no SDF, right? It's not, oops. It's not just for SDF, it works for any kind of font. SDF allows us to do more things like playing with the outer glow, the outline. Those are all shader parameters you can play with. Like for example, let's do it with a glow, right? Glow min, glow max, glow color. Let's take this guy here. So glow min, I'm going to say 0.2, glow max going to be 0.5. So the glow is external to the glyph, right? And for the color, we want probably like a yellow, so 1, 1, 0. And if I didn't mess up, we have a glow, and we can actually give it an offset. So glow offset, let's say 2, 2. So it should be like bottom right. See, it's bottom right. Let's actually scale a bit this. Like, let's go back to 10. And we have to restart because it's an object. An object don't auto reload. It's a bit too much. Let's go to 5. That's good enough for my demonstration purposes. You can see that if we were to give like a bigger offset, let's go to 4, 4, for example. You can see that here the glow gets truncated. It's because the glow needs to remain within the boundary of the character itself. And here the character itself is too skinny to have the glow set 4 pixels to the right, 4 pixels down. What we can do though is add some padding to the characters. We have something called character padding. And here it's a vector. We can either give it a float and it means that it's going to add the same amount of pixel on all directions, but I can say I want, I don't know, like 3 pixels horizontally and only 1 pixel vertically. And by doing this, it will actually make enough padding so that my glow is not truncated anymore. In this case here, I can probably get away with a smaller padding and still working. So all these shader properties are available in creation template. You can use this shader or you can even add your own shader. See, there's a property shader. You can provide your own shader with your own logic for it. It's up to you. So yeah, that's for like runtime font. Those are very handy. We will actually use it a bit later in our last example. Is there any question on this? Like, moving to the next one then. So we're going to remove the subtitle entirely, the sound, and we're going to keep our logo here and just remove all this. Okay, so now we have a spinning logo. By default, if I click, it reverses the spinning direction of our logo. Let's say that now we want to create coins under our cursor. I'm just going to use the trigger that's already here, right? I'm just going to say that the mouse left is also going to generate a spawn coin input. And in my reverse trigger, I could create a new trigger, but it's already here. So I'm going to say that every time we have a spawn coin, we're going to create a coin. Object create coin. Then we need to define our coin, right? So our coin has a graphic. The texture is just going to be pixel. The size is going to be, let's say, I don't know, like 10, 20. The pivot is going to be center, and we're going to want HSV coloring, any hue between yellow and orange. Okay, and we're also going to make them like fly. So speed, we're going to say between 200 horizontally and minus, oh, I don't know how to type today, 300 to 200 minus 500. There we go. And the lifetime, we say 0.5 seconds. Okay, let's try this. And if I click, now you can see we're creating a bunch of coins, but I want them under my cursor. So what we do here is upon creation, we're going to get the position of the mouse. So mouse get position. We're going to transform it, and we're going to ask the render get world position for this position. And finally, object set position ourselves with this. And there we go. Actually, you know what? I could have done it probably even without the onCreate. So if we were to say the position here, we're going to ask for a lazy command, and that should work exactly the same. There we go. No need for the onCreate. So we are creating a bunch of coins. So far, so good. No problem with this. What I want though is, let's make it a bit prettier. We're going to ask for an fx with a single slot, which is ourself, and we're going to make them fade away. So it's going to be alpha. The curve is going to be, oh, we don't need the curve. We are going to say that the start time is going to be after 0.3 seconds. Yeah, sure. And I'm not sure why I added this 0, but that's fine. 0.5 seconds. And the value, we're just going to completely fade out. And we're also going to say that the lifetime is bound to our fx. So now, hopefully, we have like nice feeling coins. Okay, all good. What if we were to add some audio to those coins? And for this, I'm actually going to open the folder. We're going to go to data, and we're going to add a sound that I already created with SFXR yesterday. It's just a little wave, and you will see what it does. It's actually, we can play it. No, there. Very simple sound. So we could say, okay, we have a sound list. It's ourself, and the sound is going to be coin.wave. And here, please make sure your volume is not too high, because we're creating a lot of coin, right? Like one per frame. That's not a very pleasant sound. We don't want this like rattling sound. So we could try to make it better by varying the pitch, for example. Let's say between 0.95 and 1.05. It made it maybe even worse. So instead of having the sound on the coin itself, let's add it to a child. We're going to call it coin sound. Coin sound is here. And we have our sound here. And so far, it's exactly the same, right? Not really great. However, here we can make sure that we're not going to create one sound every time we create a coin. We're going to like rate limit it. And a very simple way to do this is by making sure that we only create a new coin after a delay. There is a property on object called onPrepare. You can do a lot of things. You can modify your config there for preparing before your object. But this property, if it returns false, it will actually cancel the creation of the object. So we're just going to return false for all the coin we don't want, and only return true if we want it. So in order to do this, we're going to get the time of the core clock. There we go. We're going to get a property inside our section. We're going to call it time as well. Sorry. And we are going to, LT is for later than, we're going to make sure that we have reached that time property to spawn. If I'm not setting time, it will always be 0, and it will always create it. However, now when we create a coin, that means that we pass the prepare stage, we created our coin, and we get into the onCreate. We're going to do something that we're going to retrieve the time of the clock. We're going to retrieve inside ourselves like a delay property. We're going to sum the current time with that delay, and we're going to set it in ourselves as the time property. There we go. And here we only need to define a delay. So if we do like a 0.5 second delay, we only get a sound every 0.5 seconds. If we go back to 0, we go back to the old one. Let's say we can do something a bit more like advanced, more variation. The delay is going to be a random between 0.05 second and 0.1 second, and we get something like this, which is already much better, isn't it? There we go. So by just using those two properties on prepare and on create and retrieving the time on the core, we could have retrieved the time on like the scene object, for example, or something like this. But we can access the core clock. By just doing this, we have rate limitation for creating objects, no matter how they were created. They don't have to be coming from a spawner or something like this. And that works for any object, obviously. It's just an illustration for the sound. Any question on this one?
H. Cardi says, that's cool.
Nice, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think it's a very nice result too. Obviously, you can tweak it better, right? But from like a single wave, which was like, if you remember, just this, we get more variation with like very little effort. So I like that. Okay, we are done with our coin. Let's move on to something a bit more advanced. It might be something a bit hard to follow. Hopefully I won't make too many mistakes live. We'll see how it goes. But the idea is that when we have like complex object hierarchy, let's say like, for example, we're going to use it as a HUD, but it can work for anything. You have complex objects that you want to customize. The way one might want to do it is either by creating all sub-hierarchy manually in the config or generating it from the code. And let me... actually, you know what? I'm going to get rid of everything. I will try to illustrate a bit what I mean here. So we're going to get everything from the scene. We're going to create an element we call HUD, because I want a root that I can easily find. So the HUD, upon creation, we are just going to set our self ID. There we go. So that we can just retrieve the HUD and modify it in one go. We're going to create, let's say we have a game where every character has an ID card, and on the ID card we're going to see the avatar. Here I'm just going to use the color because I don't have images. And also like a background for the card and the name of the character. So the way you would do this usually is probably by having like a card, and the card would have a child list. And the child list would have a background and a foreground and the name and so on and so forth. And then if you want like a Melissa character that inherits from the card, you would have to, well, you would have to modify the foreground and the name as well. So that means that you would have to have a child list that is similar to it, but we might, if let's say we don't want to touch the background, only the foreground. You might want a Melissa foreground and a Melissa name, and then you want to create that the Melissa foreground inherits from foreground, and here we override actually the color, and similarly for the Melissa name that inherits from name, but we override the string. It's not very scalable, right? Because if you have 100 of people, you will have to add 100 of like sub-hierarchy like this. It's not very handy. One way to do this would be to every time we create something that is a card, you can like put a property like isCard. You can have like a callback, an event, sorry, for the object creation, and when you catch that event, you will modify the sub section. First, you need to know what the subsections are, right? And to write the color for the foreground and change the name, the string for the name. And you can do that in codes, and that works. You modify the config before creating the object, it will work just fine. But that means that you have to change your code, and you have to know your hierarchy as well. So if at some point you want to introduce new elements in your card, you will have to update your code as well. That's again not very extensible. And also, it means that the programmer is becoming the bottleneck, right? The artist or your designer cannot make the changes. They have to come to you for this kind of stuff. So we're going to look at something that is pure config today. So one way to do it would be, well, every time I create here, I can have like an on create, and I can modify again the value of the foreground. So instead of doing this, for example, we could say on my on prepare, because it has to be before the children are created, I would say I'm going to set the foreground color as one, like I can pull from Melissa, for example. Let's say I'm coding it as yellow. I could say I'm going to set the name, the string to Melissa, and so on and so forth. Again, that is a lot of manual stuff to do. And you have to know exactly your hierarchy, or you could do it the other way around, right? You could say I am inside the foreground, so I have a foreground, and here upon creation, on create, I retrieve my grandparent, so I'd say my parent, because the card is my parent, so I would say get parent, and then I would pull a value for the color, and I would set myself with this color. But again, you will have to know exactly where you stand in the hierarchy, and for complex hierarchy, it's a lot of work. So instead of doing this, what we're going to do, because here we cannot easily find the parent, the model, we're just going to say that the model is a section that's fixed. We are going to call it context today. We're going to create a context function, and that context would get all the information. So obviously, when we create like the Melissa card, here we could say, okay, instead of stating the property in all the section that I would need to know, I could say, okay, I'm going to set it in the context and modify the context for each single one. But again, that's also very tedious to do this. What we can do, though, is that context is where we're going to fetch this information, but to feed the information inside the context, we're just going to change the parent of the context. And by changing the parent of the context, we will give like different contents that is going to be available to everyone. So let's see what we can do here. We are going to create base widget, right? So we need something as a graphic. Graphic, well, it's going to be graphic self. I'm not going to put a texture yet. I'm just going to say all the things that is common for my graphic. I want a pivot that's center. In this case, I want to use parent space true. What else do I want in my graphic? I think that's all. I probably want like a texture that inherits from graphic. And again, I don't have textures today, so we're going to pretend that they are just colors in the pixel. So texture is called pixel. And yeah, that's all I want here. However, let's put like a category here. Like these are my widgets. Okay, so I'm going to also have like a text that inherits from graphic for the name, right? And the text, okay, it's ourself, and we will have to define both the string and the font. Okay, so how we do this? We know that we have a context and we want to pull from the context. So one easy way to do this is using our current name, so the section that's going to inherit from graphic, texture, or text. Those sections are going to be unique, and we can just use that as a prefix and use the name of the property as a suffix. So like here, let's say all our graphic is going to find the color from the context. So we're going to say, okay, this is a lazy command. I want to retrieve my name, so the name of the section inherited from the graphic, and I'm going to get inside the context. I'm going to retrieve my name followed by color. So the properties that will be like my foreground color, or background color, or name color, it will be found from the context and it will be set on ourselves. It might be a bit abstract, but bear with me. We're going to do the same thing with the string here. We're going to say, okay, we use our name, and inside the context, we find, I'm going to call it text because I think it's more natural. And for the font, similarly, we're going to say my name, and inside the context, I want to find font. Okay. So how does this work now? Let's say we want an ID card, and this ID card is going to be the top widget. This is going to have like, give it a size. I'm going to say it's 250 by 100, and it has children. So we want an ID background, an ID foreground, and an ID name. Okay, and that's probably we want a pivot center as well. Okay, but we need to define the context. And the way to do this is we are just going to say, before we create anything, so the preparation of the root, we're going to say, I want to set the parent of the context. So the context section, we want to set ourselves. So first I'm pushing myself, and then I'm going to say, okay, the parent of the context section is going to be me. All the information are going to be coming from me in the end. And upon creation, so once we're done, we're just going to remove the parent of the context. Set parent, context, nothing. So the context will only be linked to me during my creation. And when I'm done, the context is free to go again. Now we want a background, right? We called it ID background, and we want it to be a graphic. So we want, let's, yes. Sorry.
Just a quick question about the on prepare.
Yeah.
And on create. Is it guaranteed that nothing else will, currently, is it guaranteed that nothing else will happen between on prepare and on create?
So
no other objects other than, just kind of wondering how the layering of
right. Only the objects that are defined in the child list are going to happen, or if you create manually object, like for example, if I, during my own prepare here, I add object create, obviously that will happen there, right? But otherwise, the only creation that are going to happen are the one defined in the child list and in the child list of those children. But because I know this, I'm not going to mess around with the context in those. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's say we have a dark gray. Let's start building with an example to make sure that it's working. So here we're going to have our Melissa ID. Okay. And Melissa ID is inheriting from ID card. And let's see if we have like a, we have nothing. So that's not a good start. Here, failed to find config, that's fine. Couldn't find texture. Text or texture for graphic, yes, because I made a mistake. I did not inherit from the right one, right? So the background is inheriting from texture, not from graphic. Okay, it's tiny because I didn't give it a size. We want the background to cover the entire ID card. So because we're using the parent as both position and scale, all I have to do is say that we want a scale of 1, and it's going to cover the entire surface. So we have our background. Here the background, I hard-coded the color, right? However, for the foreground, I'm going to retrieve the color from our Melissa. So here we are going to create the foreground. It's a texture as well. We're going to say that, the scale. I think we're going to go with something like 0.4 horizontally, 0.9 vertically, and the position, we're going to say that my left line to the left of the parent with a bit of wiggle room. Let's try something like this. I'm sorry, I'm just coming up with a, oh, I didn't give it a color. Well, it's white by default. It's not too bad, actually. The positioning is a bit off, a bit too low, but other than that, it's not bad. So let's see. Oh, 0.1. I'm nitpicking here. It's not what's matter. Okay, we have our foreground here, but now we want the color to come from Melissa. So here, if you remember, we used the idiom of using the name of the widget followed by the property. So here, if I want to change the widget ID foreground color, I can define it here, and I say Melissa has a yellow color. And by creating this, we see that now Melissa card has a yellow color for this. However, we want to make it a bit more simple. We don't want to have to know the name of the actual component under us. We are going to say that I have a property named color for Melissa, and another properties where I'm going to put my name. And we're going to breed them in the parent. So if we look at the ID card here, we're going to say, here we know that we have a child named ID foreground, right? So foreground, so the color from it is going to be the same as the one we defined in the name property. And the ID, we don't have it yet, but here we can actually hardcode. We can remove the hardcode and say the background color is going to be dark gray. So, which means that this here doesn't have anything hardcoded, this one either besides the positioning. And we need a last thing, which is a name. So ID name, this is the text this time. And we're going to say that the position equals, I don't remember what I could do. I could say center to center with 0.20. We are going to see if it works well or not. Let's see. And of course, I need a string, otherwise we won't see any text. So here we're going to say that ID name, the text is going to be coming from the name. And here we want color. I'm not sure why I put name. Okay. So why do I have to? I only want one. So if I didn't make any mistake here, we have the name of Melissa. We have the yellow. Let's actually use a different font for this. If we go back to the test I made yesterday, I'm going to use the default Lazenby font, which is actually already here, so I don't need to copy it. Not sure why I have this. I need a name though. So we're going to create a font, and here we're going to say the ID name font is going to use a font called ID font. So we're going to define it here. ID font, it's a typeface, and it's going to use Lazenby. And now we should at least use Melissa. The positioning is not good. So let's say that we want our left to the center with a bit of offset. And it's a bit too low. So let's go with something like this. There we go. Okay, we have our name and we have the color. So here we see that we have bridged our Melissa card. Let's create a new worker. Let's say Albert ID at ID card. All we have to define now is the property color and name. So color, we say that Albert is going to be cyan and his name is Albert. And we're going to move this one to the right of the screen. So position 200 0 and Melissa to the left. So now we, oh, I forgot to add it to the head. So my bad. Head, where are you? Melissa, we also want Albert ID. There. And we can see that Albert is cyan, the name is Albert. Melissa is yellow, the name is Melissa. We can also change the color of the name, for example. Remember? Same idiom we have, we're going to say that ID name, which is the name of the widget, we want to change the color, and we want to use the same color as the ID foreground, so the one we define it in our property color. And if we do this, we'll see that now Melissa is written in yellow, Albert is written in cyan. So that's quite nice. Let's actually get a third guy here. Let's have John. We're going to move them a bit more apart, just for clarity. There we go. And John is going to be in the middle. John ID. I don't know, John, you're going to be orange, and your name is John. And I'm going to add you to the list of the head. And as you can see here now, we don't have to worry about like creating children or like having to know to mess with the hierarchy or the name of the component. We're just using properties we define as color and name, and that's what we're going to use inside the widget. And we can see that John is orange. It's probably not the best color for this, so let's change it a bit. Let's put it as a green. Okay, John is green now. Let's say now we want to add a new component of it. We want to have the status of this worker, but we want that status to be dynamic, to change not just at the creation of the card, but to change at any time. So we can do something a bit more advanced here. Remember, we had in our widget, actually the widgets are only this here, and here this is the card, I'm just doing this to make it a bit more clear. And these are the components for the card, and these are like the live section. So where we have our objects, right? So let's call it objects. And then we're going to have a live section with a status. So let's say that we can have multiple status like working, sick, vacation, these kind of things. We want a text that can update itself. We're going to create a din text for dynamic text, and we're going to inherit from text. But this time, instead of just fetching the content at the beginning, we're going to fetch the reference to the context. So basically, we want to know which property we will need to fetch to be able to get the status. So in here, let's say that every character, so Melissa, will have a status, and Melissa's status is working. Then we're going, so this is your live data, and it can change at any time. We're going to actually change it with the console. We're going to say that Albert is sick, and that John is missing in action. There we go. We have a status that we can pull. We just need to know where to pull things. So here in our dynamic text, we will, where is it? Yeah, it's in text here. We're going to add like a track list. So first, upon creation, on create, we're going to fetch, same as before, right? We're going to fetch ourselves and the context. We're going to get like text. But now we're going to keep track of it. We're going to set it on the instance section. So each instance is going to be different, because otherwise the context is only available during the creation of the object. It's a transient data, right? Once the creation of our card is done, the context is over. We don't know what the content was anymore. Here we're going to store it on the instance of each of the dynamic text. So we're going to say set on my instance, we're going to call it text key, and we're going to put inherit from the name from the property. And then we're going to add a track list that's going to loop. So every single frame, we're going to fetch, we're going to get on our instance, we're going to get a text key, and we're going to set our text with the content of it. So basically, we're going to edit all the time. And here, we're just going to have, first, we're going to add the status, right? So ID, you know what? The status can come with a name. We're going to put here, child. So this way, even the parent doesn't know that it exists. We're going to edit here, child this, it's going to be ID status. And the ID status inherits from din text this time. And the position is going to be, we're going to say that our top align with the bottom with a slight, I don't know. First, we're going to say use parent space, only the position. I don't want the scale to inherit from it. You'll see why. I'm going to put it a bit before, and I'm going to make it a bit smaller. So like 0.6. Okay, so we have a status, and we just need to make sure that we have the key for the status. So here, ID status text, we want a way to retrieve from the live section. So basically, we want to find either Melissa or Albert or John dot status. Let's hard code it for now, just to see if I didn't mess up anything. We're just going to say, I want to retrieve Melissa's status. And if I run this, we have nothing. So I definitely messed up something. Let's see. Oh, typo. Still not working. Can't everyone get... Oh, I forgot to push something. My bad. That's what happens when you do it live. Here, I forgot to push the result. Okay, get set. And hopefully this time it's good. No, still not. My goodness. Melissa.status is not a reset command. Okay. We say get from the text key. That should be at Melissa.status. Shouldn't be a command. So why did it say it's command? Status text. We retrieve the text. We set it as text key with the at in front of it. Should be at Melissa status. We retrieve it and we set text with this value. What did I mess up here? Let's read the debug information. That's what happens when you do it live. Okay, so can't evaluate command at Melissa status. So we did get the at Melissa, but why is it interpreted as a command? So here in the dynamic text, I'm retrieving the content of the text key, which I set as at. Let's just log it. Log text key. There we go. Oh, what's that? What's going on? I'm sorry about that. So if you see the issue, because it's hard for me to speak at the same time I'm doing this, if you see the issue and it's obvious, please let me know. We retrieve from the current instance the text key that we set here. Here we push ourselves, get the context, we get the text. The text is defined here. Here we put melissa.status, which
Could
is...
it be a missing percentage sign?
Where? Yes, it could be, but where?
Snake Eye suggested this.
Yeah, where? Okay, get a text key. You know what? I'm going to dump the
0
content.
equals?
No, that's a command, so there's no need to a percent here. Okay, so okay, the log is here. Oh yeah, the log wasn't in the, because I didn't put true here. Okay, so it's empty.
Or maybe it's an extra percentage sign. Does on prepare need a percentage sign?
On create doesn't need it, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
HCardy, and thank you, Snake Eye.
Excellent, thank you so much. So yeah, that was a silly one. And yeah, thank you so much for your help. So if we go back, actually, it's going to be easier to do it like this. And removing this one, because it's a command, not a lazy command. We do have our status, but it's so tiny, and it's because we are accumulating the scale, I believe. So where is it here? Use parent space, scale 0.6, no, from parent scale. I shouldn't need that though. What did I mess up? Oh, I don't have the font. I didn't define the font, so it's using the default font. Here, ID status font. We want this ID font as well. There we go. So they all get Melissa status, right? Because we hard-coded it. So here, instead of this, what we want to do is, this time we want a lazy command. We want to retrieve our name. So we are going to get our name, and we're going to return the name dot status. So name, sorry, dot status. And if I do this, this time we have the correct status working, missing in action, Albert. And if this data change at runtime, say like Albert now is working. So Albert status is working. You can see the widget is updated automatically here. Let's bring it a bit further, shall we? We are just going to have like assigned colors for every status. So we're going to say, okay, here working is green, sick is orange, mission action is red, vacation is cyan, and unknown is black. Okay, so what we want to do here is for our ID status, the color. Oh, actually, we don't want to do it live. So here, the ID status, we're going to extend what we do every second. So we're going to say, as we did before, so we are going to fetch our status. So object get text of ourselves, and from the status color, we're going to retrieve the color that goes with it, and object set color ourselves with the content. And now if I didn't mess up, I didn't mess up because we changed the text for some reason. What did I do? Status font, status text. I broke something. Okay, so that's definitely, oh, I did override instead of extend. My bad. Goodness gracious. Now we can see that the status, they have all their colors. So if Albert goes to working, it gets green. If Melissa goes on vacation, it goes cyan. And you can even change like the color for all the status. Let's say for colorblind accessibility, this kind of thing. Let's say, for example, do you want status colors for MIA to not be red, but to be, I don't know, magenta? You do this, and you can see that it's automatically updated. So there's a question coming for this, and we're almost done. The question is, we're pulling all those values every single frame. What the cost of this? So we're going to fire the profile version. And we can see that looking here at the object update, we do have 17 update, and in the profile version, it takes 0.05 milliseconds, which is not much. But let's say you have hundreds of card displayed, something like this, it can add up, right? And there is no need to like pull these values if you don't need them, right? You should only update them when needed. And for that, instead of having a track running every frame, we can use a trigger instead. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to remove the track list that we have here, and we're going to use a trigger instead. So trigger list, we're going to use ourselves, and we're going to say that the trigger is called update, for example, and only during the update we're going to run this code here. And same here, we're going to enhance our updates and not our 0. And we just need to apply it the first time the card is created. So here, during once the card has been created, we're just going to say object fire trigger on ourselves update recursively. So here normally I should not have broken everything. It's still working, except that we can see that the update for all the objects is now flat. It's 0 milliseconds. We're not doing any work. Let's go back in release so that we can see more clear what happens. I should actually do it in debug just in case I mess up again, so that we have messages. Now, if I were to change the status of Melissa, well, nothing happens because we need to fire the update. And all we have to do this is that because we have one root for the HUD, we just need to retrieve the HUD, and we need to fire the trigger on that HUD, and it's called update and recursively. And we can see that as soon as we fire this update, the card is changed. So now we want to change a status, like say Melissa is going to be, I don't know, sick. All we have to do is poke the HUD every time. So get HUD ID and object fire trigger on this HUD with the update true. And up, you can see that Melissa is sick. It's orange, it's updated. And this system here is like very light in terms of performance. It's all in config. Obviously, there was like some fumbling. It's because I'm on live, it's really hard when you do this. Normally, if you do it like, you take the time, it should be rather straightforward to do. You can add any property. Here, I only set the property for the color and the graphic and the font and the text and the string for the text. And here, dynamic, same thing, I change the text, but you can change any property of your object. But the advantage is that adding a new character, let's say we add a new character called Trudy, right? Trudy, she has an ID that comes from ID card. And all we have to define are those two properties for adding a new one. So let's say Trudy is pink and her name is Trudy. And then all we want to do is in our HUD, we want the child list, we add Trudy. And we're also going to make sure that it's not on top of anyone else. So position Trudy 0 negative 200. And if I create this, we have our 2D that is pink and on top of it. And it's a very dynamic system for creating complex object hierarchy. Hopefully, the fumbling wasn't too much for you guys. Oh, I forgot to put a status, right? If there's no status, nothing is displayed because we didn't give a status to Trudy. Actually, you know what? We can do it live. Like, let's say there's no status for right now. And we say, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to use this. Trudy is working, status working. And there we go. It's, work. Yes, there's no color for this status because it's not working. There we go. Trudy is working and it's green and the status has been updated. So hopefully you can see the advantage of using like the context, because all the widgets have to know is a name context, and this is the parenting is changed on the fly. It allows us to define all those properties at the roots, and you can bind those properties to something more palatable for the end user, which is only here color and name. And those are the only two properties that we define in the end in our live object here. Is there any question on this?
Just a second.
No worries, because we're done also for today. So any questions are welcome, either on topic or on orgs, generally speaking.
Ulrivo says, awesome, it looks like magic.
It does a bit, yes. Sorry about the fumbling again. It was a very silly typo, and thank you so much for the help as well to find it.
It's good to see some live debugging. For the config structure there, is that something that'll be shared after the live session? Because that I think is a
Yeah.
it's a cool example to have, and maybe something we could add to like the wiki or somewhere like that.
Definitely. So what I can do is push the project itself with the contents as a project on the Git on the Git platform, so that anyone can pull in. And if anyone want to add that to the community wiki, that'd be great for sure.
Thank you.
Any other question, either on what we did today or anything goes, really? I will take that as a no then. Well, thank you all for attending, and I wish you all a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are.
Hey, thanks, Rom. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Cheers.